Hello, EEARTS family. Hello, hello, hello.
I threw her for a loop.
He
I
did.
started to make it like I was putting the mic to me, and then I just shuffled it off to her.
He did. He tricked me. He did. I hope I still did okay. You guys are the judge. And
So good to see you, EEARTS family. And I'm sure we'll get more people joining, whether they show it or not.
and there's Jamie Jones. How are you doing? And there's Mark and LPS and that Miss Sassy and Kermit the Frog. And I think I saw MK. Knowledge 2020. It's great that you're here. Oh, Miss Energies. Hello, hello, hello. John T. D. Griffin. Oh, the room is filling up quite nicely.
Yes, much love and light to everybody. Pete's in the house as well.
Awesomeness. Hello, Pete. It's good. Life is good.
Yeah, see, Sassy one over here is all excited because we just got a big, like, 2,000-page book
Yes.
from the Bhagavata Purana.
Yes.
And there is so much scripture that has come out of the Indus Valley civilization. And most people are not really acquainted with it. They're just not acquainted with it. And it's sad because it's amazing stuff. And I think it sheds a lot of light as to our situation.
This is stuff that we really, really should be learning from an extremely early age because it affects your consciousness so much so. I mean, I really think a lot of people would be way more open than they are today.
Yeah, I think so. It's just amazing. And hello, Elena, over in Waynesville. I hope everything is good over that way. And, some of our favorite peeps and favorite area over there in Waynesville, North Carolina. Great little town.
And there's Miss Crystal Court Art. Hello.
Hello, good to see you. And that's over on the West Coast. We have people from everywhere. We got Vicodin in the house over in Montreal. And Heyoka, what's up, brother? So, Heyoka, I think you're back out in the West again now. He gets around as much as we do.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's on some level, it keeps you from getting bored. But then, gosh, if you're not well rooted, it's hard to be well nourished.
Yeah, we were talking about that as well. And so, as I was saying, there's so much scripture. There's so many amazing books that came out of the Indus Valley civilization. And I think if it was a case where everybody in the West was brought up studying that, we would have a completely different society. Completely different.
Oh, gosh, on so many different levels, too. We would have people so open-minded, so unafraid to explore the unknown. And then also people that I feel would be excited, excited to wake up and get their day started because there's so many different possibilities out of these books.
Exactly. So in the West, the mysteries are just that. They're mysteries. They're mysteries because they've been basically kind of squashed, hidden under the table. There's reason for that, too, because there was such amazing religious persecution going on in the West, and things were really hidden. One of the differences, like when you start looking into the knowledge that comes out of this area, the Indus Valley area, is it talks more about, well, what are we? What is consciousness? What really is going on in the universe? How does the universe work? And things like that. Not just about worshiping a god and listening to these rules that are given to us and learning certain stories. There are teachings and parables of which we could get, basic moral knowledge and things like that. And there are teachings and parables as well. Like when you read the Upanishads, and I've read all the Upanishads, they read like some of the best moral stories that you would find in the Bible. There's wisdom there. There is definitely wisdom there. And then, of course, we have the Vedas, which gets into a lot of the traditions. Then there's the Puranas, which really shed a lot of light into some of the mysteries of what's really going on in this universe that we live in, and talk about different beings, different types of beings. They talk about things like a day of Brahma, which one day in the life of Brahma is equal to roughly, it's pretty close to what science would tell us the age of the universe is. And that's kind of interesting when you think about it, just that in and of itself.
And wouldn't you think that, I mean, if we were able to connect to certain deities at a younger age, like how did we feel and how did they act, or read stories about certain deities and look at their personalities and then match those personalities to us would be a good way to figure out your lineage. Aw, thank you, Miss Karen Lynn. We appreciate it so much these days. Oh my gosh. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And, if we could parallel ourselves with some of these deities and we could learn from them, because even though they don't have all the answers, they have been around a little bit and maybe they could help guide us.
And I've been planning on making a video just totally about going down one of the particular paths, which is a form of Shaivism that comes out of, I'm getting a brain fart here, Kashmiri Shaivism. Because what we learn when we study Kashmiri Shaivism is all the principles of quantum physics. And it's amazing how deep it is. And so that's one form of Shaivism alone. And there's so many different scriptures. And if we talk about Patanjali's great writings, and then the writings of the Tantrics as well, there's such depth there. And they teach us so much about consciousness itself. It's not just collections of history and parables. There's so much there that is of a real scientific value. It's just amazing, really. But there are great stories in this Valley civilization, and I'm purposely not saying Vedic because the Vedas is just a part of it. It's just a piece, one piece. It's just one tomb in a much larger library. And so there's some really interesting characters in this universe that is portrayed through the Indus Valley civilization. Many different beings, some very human, some not exactly human, some that are, again, those hybrids of kind of like humanoid animals like we see over in Egypt with like Thoth with the ibis head, Anubis, and some of these other entities as well that seem to be part human, part animal, and then some that are, there's literally one classification of beings where the name literally translates to what the hell is it?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much to explore here. And thinking back, as I was growing up watching cartoons and stuff, it does feel like that they got a lot of their stories out of these books, which are, in my personal belief system, I feel they're very real, but they made them out to be fictitious and fake and not to really be paid too close attention out here in the West, which I don't think that was very nice.
Well, again, he who wins the war, writes the history, and that's what we have. So when we hear these battles of the Devas and the Asuras, and there's more different beings than just those, it's an oversimplification just to say that, it's like angels versus demons, because it really isn't that. It's different. It's multidimensional, interdimensional, extraterrestrial, and, also involves humans that are living on the planet as well as beings that are living in the planet. So they also knew that there was an inner earth societies, really, I should say societies plural, because there were different beings that are living inside the earth that they recognized that as well. And of course we have Shambhala and Agartha, these different legends. And so one of the great avatars, Rama, literally it says that he was inside the earth in his kingdom there, and then came to the surface because some beings, these asuras, who we could equate them to demons, but really they are a humanoid being. They just came down and just started taking over the show in certain areas, and just like an invading army, just taking over and ransacking and pillaging and making wives of whatever women they want, because they were humanoid and able to do that. And so this one demon king or asura king, because everything's gotten really, really jumbled. Gods, we can't really use that word. Well, we could, but it gets people confused because, if there's only one God, and we could go, and I like to just say source, there's one source of everything. There's these beings that we thought of as the gods, but really they're other beings. So, they're beings sometimes of flesh and blood, sometimes not, and on this density. But they are beings like us, just, more technically advanced and understanding the principles in science of how the universe works. But in many cases, almost all the time, they have human emotions.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Think Westworld. Westworld was such a good depiction of, if you want to use the word gods, because they could program each other, and the gods were actually the humans. And I believe that the beings we call gods, they probably did have a pretty good idea about how to, move through dimensions. They probably did have access to higher technologies that would make us think that they were magical. And, maybe in I'm sure in many ways that they were magical, or they are magical. And I also think that they have a lot to offer. If they got to where they're at, with their knowledge and their power, and they're offering us a path there. If you see something someone has and you like it, you do what they do to get what they got. And these books offer that. They offer kind of a path on a higher way of a being or existence.
So the evil Ravana, the king of the demons, again, the king of the Asuras, and he spied Rama's beautiful wife Sita in the forest. He fell in love with her instantly. And so he got his servant to disguise himself as a deer and then tempt Rama and Lakshman, which is his brother, away from Sita so he could kidnap her. And anyway, there's a story that goes after that. And Hanuman and his army, and again, Hanuman's kind of like the ape man you could think of, but really he's a demigod himself. And that gets into that terminology, and that gets us into Genesis 6, right? And again, if we look at it just from the biblical standpoint, we're not getting the whole picture. We have to look at it from all standpoints. And, well, thank you, Benjamin. 1111. We appreciate your support.
We love your support. Thank you so much.
So he takes Sita to Sri Lanka, and there are remnants of this, what looks to be a bridge, and science will tell you it's a natural bridge from the mainland over to Sri Lanka. But the stories say that it was built by Hanuman and his army. Under Rama's lead, in order to get over there so he could get his wife back. And so it hit me reading all these stories. Well, who are the Asuras? And really, to me, I feel that the Asuras that they're talking about are really the gods of the Sumerian pantheon that came and gave us the kingship from on high. That's really what it kind of hits me as, because their ways are totally different. The ones like Rama and Krishna and these other truly benevolent entities, what did they do? Well, they taught mankind. And it gets back to when we look at other traditions. And if we look at future predictions, Mother Shipton says, strange silver ships are going to come from the sky after all the things are done, after the bad powers that be are destroyed, after the earth changes, the poles shift and everything. These strange ships come out of the sky, and benevolent beings, some humanoid, some not so human, come out and help us put it all back together. And it's not just her. The Hopi have the same legends, other tribes, indigenous people from Africa and everywhere. They have the same legends, and they also remember these benevolent beings that did it in the past as well, that helped them before. So it's really interesting to see that. Again, that the victors write the history. So if we are being ruled by forces that we don't really think are too benevolent. Perhaps they're kind of telling us the bad guys are the good guys and the good guys are the bad guys. There are amazing descriptions in these books of these vehicles that fly through the air that the gods are battling the demons with, quote unquote. The Asuras and the Devas having their battles, and they fly through the air, they shoot things at each other. There's ancient depictions of them that look very, very reminiscent of different aerial ships, traditional UFOs and saucers that we've seen. So, the picture, I think, when you start looking into these, it gets pretty clear. We're in the middle of a big, huge extraterrestrial interdimensional battle. And this war is one that in which this Earth is just a tiny little battlefront. It's tiny compared to what's going on out there. And so, Cindy, when she's done her channeling, she's got just that. I don't know if a lot of times she doesn't remember what she channels when she's doing a channeling, and she just did a channeling right before we came on. In which also we got from Laurel, the Pleiadian, and who's very nice and benevolent, has a great energy. That the next 2-3 weeks are kind of a critical point for a lot of things. A lot of people need to be very, very wary if you are doing things like we are, and telling the truth, because there's forces that are going to try to clamp down. But she also we'll cover some of the other things in an upcoming video. She reiterated again some of the timelines. So we know once we get really close to the election, there's going to be an awful lot of chaos. And again, this is still part of the battles that they were talking about so long ago, thousands of years ago. So the time of Krishna is thought to be about 5,100 years ago. And Rama is before that by another 2,000 or 3,000 years, depending on who you're listening to, as we look at some of the Vamana's designs. Fascinating stuff. Now, here's top 10 interesting Indus Valley civilization facts. Why are they showing a mushroom cloud, right? Why would they show that? Interesting stuff. Politics. They're totally different, totally different. So what we have with these devas are beings, again, that are trying to teach us how the universe works. They're trying to get humanity up to par. Whereas it's just the opposite with the Asuras. The Asuras, they just want to rule us. Oh boy, doesn't that sound like what we read in the Sumerian teachings? Now in the Sumerian teachings, they say they created man as a slave race. But when we look at this, it's more like man was here and was perhaps more advanced than after the Asuras came. We went backwards. We've gone down. And so, there is again the line of thought which feels very right to me, and I think Cindy verified it before in channeling, that the Lemurian society was more like a 5D society. It was a higher society. And Atlantis went downwards, even though the technology went up, the spirituality went down. And also the fact that we are going through and have been going through this area in space where all these dark entities are and have held sway. So it's interesting, right? The civilization, the culture, the politics, absolutely different. Totally different. There was no sign of a ruler or powerful authority throughout the region. And that's a feature of the Indus Valley civilization. And that made this culture unique to scholars. We know nothing of their system of governance. While there is little or no proof that such an ordered and hierarchical community could exist without local or central regulation, contrary to any civilization in which a king or a priest was the main figure of the whole political structure, nobody has ever found such a figure referenced. Interesting. You mean the people could actually govern themselves? Isn't that a novel idea?
Yeah, right? I mean, what about that? That would be pretty amazing if people could govern themselves. I think the world would look a lot different. So there's just so many things I mean, our world could look so different and even better. And right now, honestly, I just know in my heart we are not the pinnacle of modern man. They have done so much work on us, by taking our DNA and changing it, and then calling the rest of our DNA junk DNA. I think what they've done is they've had to go through and make different species of humans to do their work and make us more susceptible to doing what they say, more compliant.
Yeah. So I think that, again, just again, if we want to look biblical, who rules this world? Well, it's the adversary. It's Satan. It's right out there. Okay, well, and Satan's a liar. So then why would we trust any of our history? Why would we trust the official version of all of these main scriptures? We know the Bible's been, totally put together with a political ideology behind it by Constantine, because, again, they only took a handful of books and burned the rest. So, and then also there's redactions and revisions galore. There's over 3,000 in the oldest copy of the book, Gospel of John. So they've tailored it to suit their purposes. And that doesn't mean that you don't have an amazing teacher in, say, Yeshua, as being, if we look to the law of one, being a higher dimensional being coming down and trying to set things right and get us back on track, giving us such teachings, as actually turning the other cheek. The other thing with this Indus Valley civilization, there's no sign of militaries. And, they lived in a wall-less society where every other culture is building walls to defend themselves. They were open. It's showing me that they had a peace. They had a totally different civilization than what we've had under Sumerian rule that has turned into the Roman Empire rule, which has turned into, other rules going all the way down to the British Empire and what we have now. It's basically their system. It's a Sumerian system we have. And so to me, I don't think that they created us. I think they downgraded us. And now, we are going to be upgraded because of the energies coming in. And that makes them panic, because then, again, it'll be like, well, they ate of the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. We can't let them eat of the tree of life, or they'll be like us. Or we can't live in peace and harmony. And look what they can do if they join together. Let us go down there and disrupt them. It quite clearly tells us that, those are not benevolent beings. And actually, when we read the Sumerian texts, we get the idea quite clearly that they view us as nothing but slaves, even though some are more, some are a little bit nicer to us than others. But what we see here is a culture that's absolutely different, totally different. And so you don't have a central ruler. You have no power or authority. It appears the people may have governed themselves, and that's one of the definitions of anarchy, which has such a, negative connotation in our society, because, it's basically, it could be looked at as a utopian society with no central, authority. Wouldn't that be lovely? It really would. And so it's really interesting to see. Again, there's no images or engravings, no evidence or weapons found in the cities, or of any kind of war activities. And from what I have experienced, in this tradition, is people that are truly delving deep into this tradition. In most cases, they're very, very peaceful people, and they show a lot of tolerance and a lot of love. And I think when we look at the culture, it seems to be that they're one of tolerance, peace, and love. Very, very interesting. No one has seen such a picture of Harappan cities relative to the Mesopotamian city-states, which were continuously warring and portraying their warfare in their art and written works. So we have very, very diametrically opposed systems here. Now, it's sad because, this system is not the system that's dominating the world. Obviously, the Sumerian system is the one that's dominating the world. We still are at war constantly. It's just the way.
It is just the way, you know, and it did take for me to discover the Sumerian tablets to really, really wake up and understand that a lot of the stories that are in the Bible came from the tablets. And, you know, how many coincidences does one need? You know, I looked at like the flood story, and I looked at this war, and I looked at that war, and looked at these stories, and then it's like pretty soon after about the 7th or 8th story that paralleled with the Bible, it's just one of those things where you really have to sit down and go, maybe what I'm reading isn't exactly true. Maybe what I'm reading is something that they use to control us with.
Yeah, there was a question if we'd done any videos on Antarctica. We've talked about them. We could revisit that too. There's so many different aspects to look at there. But by 1999, they had found over 1,056 cities and towns, 96 of them excavated. So there's been a lot. And Mohenjo-Daro is the aging on that. It keeps going back farther and farther, realizing how ancient it is. So I feel that what we're looking at here is more of the remnants of leftover, perhaps Lemurian knowledge and Lemurian culture that it, lived on. So it gets into the use of seals. There's some other things we're just going to touch on. The first dentists in the world were actually there. Dentistry. They had the most precise measurements humanity had at the time too, even more than the Chinese civilization, Egyptian, or the Mesopotamian. They did have Shiva, and Shiva appears to be the oldest deity on the planet from what we've seen so far. But it's not really like as you would think as well, because if you look into it and basically split up the word Shiva into its two components, means that which is not. So you could view it in a Gnostic light, and Shiva is kind of like the unmanifest. They had a revolutionary design of houses as well, and they had a lot of two-story houses, central courtyard, and accessible flat terrace. They had well-planned urban planning, and again, fascinating to see this. It's the biggest civilization in the ancient world, but it doesn't get any real attention. It's been so downplayed, where Mesopotamia has been so upplayed, and as well as Egypt. The focus has always been over there instead of over here. And for me, the more I've studied all of them, I found that I think this is the real gem. And they also had the Chinese culture as well. And so it was actually the largest. Now, what's really interesting is what happened to it. Mysterious death. And in particular, what happened to them? Well, I think it really was the battles that we hear portrayed. And I think, that the good guys left. And perhaps they left because of a dimensional shift, a dimensional downgrade, where they can no longer reach us because we're going down, down, down in density. As the Sumerian culture and as, that elite group, whatever you want to call them, the Anunnaki gods or what have you, took over. It seems like we were heading in deeper and deeper till we came into the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, and now we're rising up again. So perhaps we will be able to, again, access the good guys. And maybe that's when we come out on the other side, as Mother Shipton and the Hopi and others have said, and all of a sudden then these benevolent beings appear again and help us rebuild again. Perhaps it's because we are up closer to where they actually are in vibration, in density. So there's 6 theories on what happened to them. And there's things that are pretty typical, such as floods, because there's been massive floods that have changed the world. We have complete cities that are under hundreds of feet of water right now, and then at the same time the water was higher in some periods in the ancient time, and now it's receded. It might be a case where we're going back to being flooded out. It definitely seems like that's the case. The nearby desert penetrated the fertile region, made it unfertile. Aryan invaders killed and destroyed the civilization of the Indus Valley. as well. And then there's a lot of thought on who are these alien invaders really. And Robert Seffer, Atlantean Gardens, one of my favorite channels, he's looked at that in depth. And, really he thinks that they are, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it certainly feels like he thinks that you're talking about survivors of Atlantis and that culture, which came in. And so one of the things, epidemics, earthquakes, well, we got those going now as well. Earth changes, changing the course of the river. But there is something else that's very, very interesting. And that's the fact that they have found fused glassification, which would indicate heat up to 1500 degrees Celsius, accompanied by rapid cooling, and also radioactivity. In other words, it looks like they were nuked.
That keeps showing up in these books over and over and over, where they mention things like, what is it, Sodom and Gomorrah, where it was kind of torched, and they won't come right out and say that it was nuked, but after a while, when you're reading these ancient scripts and you see how they describe certain ships and certain beings, that you're not dealing with a biological entity. You're dealing with something of force, and it's quite nasty.
Okay, so basically, yeah. And so one scientist that was studying it said that what was observed in Mohenjo-Daro was exactly in line with what we saw in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Ooh, And then when we read these stories and we hear of these explosions from these weapons being used by the Asuras that are 10,000 times the brightness of the sun, yeah, it looks like that. It really looks like that. And it looks like they're trying to do this all over again. So, very, very clear picture develops, I think. And as we see here out of ancient code, Mohenjo-Daro, an ancient city destroyed by a nuclear attack thousands of years ago. Is it possible? No, this was an ancient city that belonged in the Indus Valley civilization, was destroyed by a nuclear attack. Well, there's a lot of evidence to say yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there sure is. And it's piling too. Luckily, right now, we're in a position where we can go online and find information. Granted, they are doing somewhat of a cyber burning, because when we do these shows, it's becoming more and more difficult to find this information. And it's just sort of slowly melting away. Nothing too drastic, because I don't think they want people to notice. But yeah, we got to dig a little deeper to get this stuff.
So Robert Oppenheimer, who was the father of the atomic bomb, he was given a lecture at the University of Rochester. And on that occasion, a student asked him if the first nuclear device that went off was the one at Alamogordo during the Manhattan Project. And Oppenheimer responded, well, yeah, in modern times. Yeah, of course. In modern times. Ooh, what did he not say?
Things that make you go, there is a lot of stuff here, and it's interesting when you really get into it and you start to realize that things that you've been told your whole life, it's just not true. So you have to go back and start questioning things again, and go back and, question who taught you what and why did they teach you that. But it's a really good way of kind of discovering yourself, like, who am I? What is this place that I'm in? And this is a journey we're all on, and we should at least be told the truth, in my humble opinion.
So my question to you guys is, do you guys think that we are here in the middle of a interdimensional extraterrestrial battle, and perhaps we're actually way behind, deep behind enemy lines?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally feel that we are. There's things that we just don't know, and it's really hard sometimes to navigate this life, because you start to find out that things are not truly what they seem or what they are, that there's a lot of deceit. And to what extent have we been conditioned and brainwashed?
I find this whole situation fascinating. It's just so fascinating. Mohenjo-Daro, I would love to be able to. I don't know if we'll ever get a chance in the world now to go and actually see these sites. And feel it, but I feel it out here. I feel it in the West. What we have felt in Nevada and Arizona, Nevada and Arizona especially, I feel like there's a lot of relics of the battles. I mean, I feel them. There's been places that we have been so overwhelmed with these feelings of death from above. When you go in between Flagstaff and New Mexico, past Winslow and even right before Winslow, there's some craters. There's what they call meteor craters. I don't feel they're meteor craters, and Cindy doesn't either. We were both out there, and I could just zoom into it and feel the death and destruction that came from above. And I think it was warfare. I think it was advanced warfare, and also on just civilian populations that were probably mixed. My feeling is that there have been a lot of different ETs, what we call ETs, on this planet. And I think in the past, there was quite a variety that were here, mostly benevolent. But I think that this planet's been taken over by malevolent ones that keep us in the dark, keep us in a system where we don't even realize that we're working for them, still doing their bidding. And then they've given us a false history, and they've led us down wrong roads in our philosophies and our science and our religions too.
Yeah, so you really have to stop and question your belief system. Where did you learn it from? Who taught you that? Does it resonate with your heart? And probably a lot of things do, but then there's going to be a lot of things that don't. When I really tried hard to go to church and do the right thing and volunteer, at church, but I kept asking myself, I really liked astrology and I really liked tarot cards, and I was kind of feeling down on myself because they told me that I really shouldn't mess with those things. So you got to kind of take that and look around in your life and figure out, where did your belief systems come from, and are they of your heart? And if not, go deeper, question deeper.
So we talked about the Mahabharata. That's just one of the texts, although that's one of the most, if not probably the most renowned and revered text that comes from this area. It's an extensive poem of some 215,000 verses. Details events that occur in the city of Mohenjo-Daro, where both the gods and the mortals were wrapped in an epic war, overshadowing the remote origins of the city, since the Mahabharata places the ancient city in the years 3103 BC during the Kali Yuga. Well, that's the beginning of the Dark Age, and a kind of apocalypse that occurred in the distant past that modified much of the ancient history of India. And technically, apocalypse. It's the unveiling. It's fascinating to look at this. And this is just one. And we're going to go into, and I'm going to show you some really interesting stuff that comes out of the Bhagavad Purana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they're fun stories, and they teach a lot of morals. And, it's just stuff that's really good for the soul. And that's why I believe that it should be taught from a younger age. Like, if they're going to have our children learn stuff from their books to make us good little batteries for their societies and to help run their banks and their stores, that's what they're doing. I think that these are things that would be good to be taught in school or even at home.
And just to give you guys like a little reference point, the Mahabharata is just one text. There are tons of texts. There's the Vedas, the Puranas, the Upanishads. There are so many divided down in there. So we have in the Mahabharata 215,000 verses, right? In the Bible, there's 23,000 verses in the Old Testament and 7,957 in the New Testament. So, this text dwarfs it. Just this one text. And this text is probably only not even 100th or 1,000th of everything that's out there. So meanwhile, in the Western mind, all we've done is study the Bible, and we're getting cliff notes, and we're not getting all the answers. Yeah, because everything's been redacted. It's like an FBI paper where everything is, they blotted out 9 of 10 words
Right.
is what we have there. So if we could look over and start learning from other traditions and see, well, what really happened? Well, here you have just about 10 times the amount of information just in this one text.
Right.
So, and I've gone through that several times, and that's why I'm kind of so convinced the way I am, as well as looking at many others. Like I've read the Tao Te Ching, dozens of times through, and there's so many different amazing books out there, and we're just limiting ourselves looking at one redacted FBI paper, or a CIA paper in which 90% of it's been removed. So thankfully we've found stuff at Nakamati, that has given us some interesting aspects that we didn't see. And then we could also go and study the texts and works that come out of Zoroastrianism, and then understand too, since there was the exile in Persia, the Babylonian exile, and which ended up leading to the Jews having a Persian influence from the Zoroastrian religion and scriptures, which really gave way to a lot of what became Christianity, as well as the mysticism and the mystery schools that were in Egypt as well. And of course we've had the book burnings there in the Library of Alexandria, because those that won this war, they basically got rid of everything they could that could really paint the full picture. And here you see at one line, Gurkha, flying a swift and powerful Vimana, hurled a single projectile charged with the power of the universe. That sounds like nuclear warfare.
Yeah, it sure does. It sounds, and these are the things we're talking about when you read these books. They do make it obvious that this is not the pinnacle of modern society where we're living right now. They had some pretty superior stuff.
An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose with all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon. Can you imagine what that would have looked like to the humans? Now, the humans that were there, along with the quote-unquote gods, the devas, the asuras, can you imagine? I mean, that would have just blown their mind. And Iron Thunderbolt, that's why they don't have the words for it. They couldn't say, well, that must be a product of nuclear fusion or fission. No, they didn't have those words. All they could do is kind of like describe it. A gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Andhakas. Entire races destroyed, right? Now, these were different races. So, and when we get into these texts, they talk about all different types of humanoid beings. There were a lot of different extraterrestrial species living on the earth. It's the bottom line. Why do you think we have all the different races we have now? Why do you think we have the little hobbit-like creatures that are only up to our hip? And why there have been perhaps many other different types of beings, like perhaps Big Feet, or what we would call Bigfoot today, or Sasquatch, or Yeti, or other things, skunk ape, There's so many different types of beings. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Well, we learned about that too from Hiroshima. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all the foodstuffs were infected. I mean, this is nuclear radiation to escape from this fire. The soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. Dense arrows of flame like a great shower issued forth upon creation, encompassing the enemy. A thick gloom swiftly settled upon the Pandava hosts. All points of the compass were lost in darkness. Fierce wind began to blow. Clouds roared upwards, showering dust and gravel. Birds croaked madly. The very elements seemed disturbed. Yeah, the elements are disturbed when there's a nuclear blast. The sun seemed to waver in the heavens. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible, violent heat of the weapon. Elephants burst into flame and ran to and fro in a frenzy over a vast area. Other animals crumpled to the ground and died. From all points of the compass, the arrows of flame rained continuously and fiercely. So this is just, to me, it's an obvious advanced weaponry going on, and it's overwhelming when you start looking at it. And I'll have all the links for you guys too. So I wanted to read this to you. This is talking about the different humanoid species. So here you see the Manusa, or humanoids. Among the humanoids are human beings, Devas, Asuras, Kinnaras, which are half human and half beast, Kimparusas, which are ape-like creatures. Maybe that's your Bigfoot Yeti, etc., etc. Gandharvas, which are heavenly musicians. Aparsuras, which are like angelic. Vyadharas, winged angels. Siddhas, which are superhumans. And so Siddhas, that's also the next stage in human evolution. So it not only tells us, about all these different beings, and in fact, the Padma Purana mentions that there are 400,000 different humanoid species in this entire universe that we're in.
That's quite a lot, and I really do feel that at one point in their life, they did intermingle, and we intermingled with quite a few different things. And I feel kind of what's happened now is the densities have kind of been peeled apart, so we're not really walking with each other anymore. But I feel that's going to change. I feel things are going to come back together, and maybe not too much of a distant future.
And it gets into other beings that are basically what we would term beings living on different densities, like astral beings. It gets into all different classifications. There are so many different forms of life out there, so many different, intelligent forms of life. And there are these as well, the Rudranas, which are reptilians, part of the Asura clan. So reptilians are off. That's where it's coming over here as I'm doing that, but it's right here. Reptilians are included in the Asura clan, often remarked as malevolent to other living entities, and they also happen to be basically part of these beings that are of a different density. And so it's all right here. This is what we're saying is, look, people, it's all right here. They got it down. As you see here, 432,000 humanoid races in the Rig Veda multiverse. And it's also a multiverse. They describe it as a multiverse because ultimately our entire universe is just a cell. It's just a cell. Just like you have cells in your body, billions and probably actually trillions of cells in your body, the entire universe is just a cell, and the body is something bigger. So they understood all this, so many years ago. The Proto-Vedic and Vedic cultures that presently trace to 11,000 years in antiquity. And so the Sumerian culture, comes out about 5,000 years ago or so, 5 to 6. This is tracing farther back. And they understood the yugas. They understand the different ages. They understand that there's a changing of density through the ages. Like humankind, when we're in a golden age, we live like thousands of years. That's our normal lifespan. Where in the Kali Yuga, it gets down to the point where the average lifespan is like 50 years. So it's fascinating that they understood all of this. And if we could just get more people to really look into it, because here they're giving us a much truer glimpse of our history and the situation that we are in.
And that's a really beautiful thing. And I wish this was more spread out. I wish more people had access to it, because I do believe it could change a whole culture. I feel it could change societies. I feel it can change people, their hearts. But just by simply knowing that there is way more out there than just us humans. It does take a little bit of time when you've been conditioned to think that we're the only thing here on the universe and there's nothing else more. You're all alone. But when you do figure it out, it opens up a whole new world or worlds for you.
Okay, so Dr. Z brings up a good point. He says, I wouldn't say one race is all malevolent or benevolent. Shiva loved both the Devas and the Asuras, and Shiva would grant a boon to an Asura if the Asura was, basically, basically following protocol, and basically, giving him that energy. He would grant a boon, and in fact, there's some really interesting stories there, because one time Shiva fought Vishnu, and it was because of granting a boon to an Asura that was a follower of Shiva. Now, if you go back far enough and you look back deep enough, and so we could look at Shiva and Shakti as creative forces. And so Shiva is kind of like, he is the void out of which, the creation will manifest itself, through Shakti, or the goddess energy, the divine feminine energy, as Cindy Steppenmini.
I think it's important to explain to people what a boon is.
Okay. A boon is like granting a wish, basically. So if you know how to bring about change, and bring about change in your own situation, if you know how to use the creative force that lies within, because source is within all of us, and as we grow more aware and more assured and start to know, because like Christ said, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain, and I don't think there's anybody that thinks they can move a mountain on this planet right now, even with your mind. But if you did have that type of, if you had that type of faith, and to the point where you knew, then you're tapping into Shiva, which is that which is not. And then you can manifest. If you know the laws of the universe, you could use them to your will. And so the Asuras can do that just as much as the Devas can. And that's part of this battle.
And thank you so very much. Will Saul, FAQs, we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So it's understanding it. And so when you look at the law of one, it does say that there are many. So let's take the Draco. The Draco, there are a few on 3D. There are more in 4D. There are some in 5D. What? 5D? How could they go up to 5D? Well, because, according to the law of one, you can get higher up and still be on that, what we would view as a negative path, in the sense that it's more service to yourself and maybe even your lower energies. If you understand how the universe works and you're able to manipulate it. And now, ultimately, you're going to have to switch, because you'll get to a dead end. And that's kind of where a lot of the Draco entities are. They're just stuck. They're not going to go anywhere higher. They're at an evolutionary stasis point. Whereas in service to others, you could continue to move higher and higher, and ultimately come back into a unity with source, but still maintaining your own individuated consciousness.
And I think that's exactly why these days they know their time is short, so they are trying to keep us in a low vibration, which is absolutely horrible, by keeping so much chaos externally, with the wildfires and the protests and some certain illnesses that I won't mention. But they keep us busy looking on the outside of ourselves, because that's one of the things that keeps us in a low vibration and in a state of fear. So it's just a nasty trick that they play.
So Wendy says, why does CERN have a Shiva statue? It's because they're intent on using the laws of the universe. They're basically saying to us, we understand how the universe works, and we're going to use it to manifest the desired outcome that we want. So it's not that Shiva is a demon, as what has been tried to be taught to people, from a fundamentalist standpoint. Quite the opposite. It's Shiva is a force of nature, and even more than that, he's that which out of the emanating consciousness going through the manifestation of that feminine energy becomes reality. So they understand that. So Shiva, again, literally means that which is not. So it's that which has not come into form yet. So it's ultimately it's consciousness itself. And whereas when we look at the divine feminine, if we're looking at Sophia, the Gnostic tradition, she's the manifest mother. So she's that which gives birth to all that there is in this manifest universe. But it's through the impregnation of that which is not, the pure consciousness that is the ultimate source of all.
And thank you so much, Ornco Loco. We really appreciate it a ton these days. I mean, it's super critical. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And so Jessica says, I do understand that the Draco will not be welcomed in 5D Earth. There are systems to prevent non-unity beings. Yeah, and when we look at the true angelic realm, which, the battles go up even very high. Mm-hmm. But when you get up at the very, very highest, levels, there are these beings that control the laws of the universe and, keep things from being completely destroyed. But at the same time, this is a free will system. So that's, unfortunately, the dark side of the free will is that, beings can do evil to other beings, or what's perceived as evil. So we can look at it from this standpoint. Some of those beings look at us like we're nothing but, okay, Cindy said ants. I was going to go towards sheep, pigs, cattle, chickens, the things that we as humans just view as a source of food, protein. Oh, that's my protein intake for the day. Now, do you think those chickens, cows, and sheep and pigs think that we are benevolent or malevolent beings?
Well, of course, we're going to make it out to be that we are benevolent to them because, farmers wouldn't want them to catch on because if they did, they might run away.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, Greta. Much love, dear sister.
Thank you, Greta. Thank you.
So again, it's perspective, and that goes back to like what Dr. Z was saying. Because it's all perspective. To us, these beings, if perhaps, we were all of a sudden watching the sky and these ships come down, and these beings that are way more powerful than us are all of a sudden the top of the food chain and not us, and we're being herded into, different cities, and if you look at some of the Sumerian depictions, we have humans that have, in some cases, ropes around their neck. They're all strung together. Like, the atrocities that we see were done to the African people who were then brought over here. And again, perspective. I mean, look at the creators of our Constitution who are viewed with and revered in a high light. And then so many of them were slave owners. If you're a slave, are they benevolent or malevolent? Every being wants its freedom. Every being, down to that cow that is tagged on the ear and, is going to end up being taken in and processed, quote unquote. It's still killing and it's still slaughtering, and it's, it's all from the perspective of, is it being done to you or not?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, that we know as much as we could possibly know about our history, because I feel like if we knew or know where we've been, we would know more about where we're going. And that's a reason why they keep so much of this literature from us, or they demonize it, or they say, well, if you look into this, you're going to burn in hell, and they keep you afraid of this information.
So, here we see it's just an amazing fact that's out there. How did they know? Were they just making this up, that there was 432,000 humanoid races? Why pick 432,000? What if these beings, these other beings that were here in times past, were mostly benevolent, and then there was a malevolent force from a human perspective that came in? Because again, if you were... let's just take a Celt. If you were a Celt, living in France or, over in what's now the UK, and the Romans came and ransacked your cities and, did their thing, again, are they malevolent or benevolent? Well, to you, they're malevolent. It's all a matter of perspective. But, this goes on in the bigger picture. So, what we see on Earth, as above, so below.
As within, so without, and that rings true on like every single level. If you look on the outside of yourself and say your home is cluttered or it's messy, things just don't look right on the outside of you. Well, you probably have some cluttered up issues and messes inside of your own head, because that manifests to the outside of you. And that's like a law throughout.
So I wanted to share this with you guys just to get you thinking a little bit, and we'll delve into it deeper. I felt like we were over an hour. I don't want to overwhelm everybody. But we'll go in a lot more depth into this as well, because, this is part of our history that has been so purposely hidden from us. And, it's being uncovered now. It really is being uncovered, and more people are waking up to this.
Yeah, and you guys have been absolutely wonderful and terrific tonight, and we appreciate all of your support. If you don't mind hitting the thumbs up before you go, that would really help us a ton.
Guys, thank you so much for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon.